sometimes it can be really annoying to have people say, well, appreciate the positive things, be grateful. That's not what I'm saying. It's more just that our brains are really designed to focus on the negative stuff. So we don't need to give in to that. Like our brains want to look for the tigers, right? That's our natural makeup. It's what has felt important throughout our lives. And for us to shift our mental mixtape to more of a positive one is difficult, but once you get it rolling, it becomes an earworm. It repeats.
Welcome to Tilt Parenting, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. I'm your host, Debbie Reber, and this week I'm talking with KJ Dell'Antonia, a mother of four, the former editor of the New York Times Motherlode column, and the author of the new book, How to Be a Happier Parent, Raising a Family, Having a Life, and Loving Almost Every Minute. In our conversation, KJ shares what she learned about happiness while writing her book, tells us what she believes is getting in our way from finding happiness in the day-to-day, even when things are hard, and shares some strategies for building more happiness into our daily lives. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Before I get to that, if you get value out of this podcast and the conversations like my one today with KJ and all the other thought leaders I have on this show, please consider signing up to support it. To make a small monthly contribution to help cover the cost of production, just sign up at patreon.com/tiltparenting. You can also find the link on any of the show notes pages for the podcast over on the Tilt Parenting website. Thanks so much. And now here is my conversation with KJ. Hey, KJ, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Good. Me too. I am excited to talk about how we can be happier parents. You're the perfect person to have this conversation. And, just as a way of introducing you, would you mind just taking a few minutes and just tell us a little bit about your backstory, who you are in the world, who you are as a parent, and we'll start with there. And then I want to hear about why you wrote this book.
Okay. I am professionally the former editor of the Motherlode blog at the New York Times. For 5 years, I was the lead writer and the editor and did all the, basically, if you saw it on the Motherlode blog or if you read it in the Times and it had to do with parenting, it's pretty, well, if it's on the Motherlode blog, it's definitely me. It was in the Times and it had to do with parenting. There's a decent chance I had some kind of a hand in it, depending on what it was. And I was really focused on parenting policy and culture and society and the ways that we deal with each other as parents, the ways that things are good, the ways that they are less than good. It was not a personal writing experience, but as an editor, I was editing a lot of personal writing. So what was happening is that there's things just kind of crashed into each other. There's all this research going on while I'm doing this and that I'm responding to that's all about, how parenting robs parents of all joy, how having children robs parents of all joy. That's one of my favorite. It wasn't a Times headline. It's just like, oh, geez. We were answering survey questions in ways that led researchers to write things like, parents would prefer doing laundry to being with their children. There was the book All Joy and No Fun, which was written by a friend of mine. And, it's just this moment that I'm watching and responding to professionally of, it wasn't just the things that are obviously hard. I mean, yeah, we don't have family leave. This country, we talk a great game about supporting families. We don't do diddly. And so there's all of that out there. And yes, school hours don't match work hours and summer, don't get me started. But there's this feeling of like that the things that are pretty good are also a slog. So the minivan is a slog and the sippy cups are the slog and dinner is a slog and everything is just feeling so painful. And this is not me criticizing my fellow parents because I was right in the middle of it. I have 4 kids. They are now 12, 13, 14, and 17. But, as I was getting started in this, it would have been more like 8, 9, 10, and 13. And, we were living it. We were right in the middle of this sort of feeling that what we thought would be our family life had turned out to be an additional full-time job. And I wrote the book because I wanted to figure out why that was happening and how we could make it stop.
Wow. So lots to talk about. And actually, as you were talking and telling us about the impetus behind the book, I was thinking, I do remember there were a couple articles trending that were specifically about that people with children were kind of the unhappiest adults around.
Yes, it was a thing.
It was a thing. Yeah, I forgot about that. And, so part of my mission for Tilt is to help parents raising atypical kids find more joy. That's in my mission statement, in their journey, because, this is what we're doing. We're raising these kids. And when we can be happier in that process, everyone's going to benefit, our kids, our family. And, I am the first to admit that joy can feel like a far stretch from where we are, especially when we're in those kind of earlier elementary school years, or, when things are most challenging. So I know you did a ton of research for this book. Why is, in your opinion, and from what you found, being happier a worthy goal? How do we benefit when we as parents can be happier in this?
Oh, we so benefit. And it's so important to just make the effort to do this, not just for yourself, but it benefits others as well. If doing it for yourself isn't enough. And I like to start by saying, look, happiness is not a pie. So it's not like if you're happy, someone else has to be less happy. A lot of the times we look at the world and we think, how can I be happy when things are still bad? Or, how can I be happy when my child is struggling? Or how can I be happy when I'm unhappy about the political situation or, an international problem. It's just not fair for me to be happy. And that is so wrong. And actually, since you're living in the Netherlands, I will point out, people in Denmark don't have that mental conversation. People in Bali don't have that mental conversation. It's a kind of an American thing to think, well, if everyone else is unhappy, it is my responsibility to be also unhappy. It's just crazy. You can be happy, and actually, happy people are more helpful in difficult situations. They're more likely to give to charity. They're more able to be helpful to other people who are struggling. They're, more pleasant for everyone else to be around. And on a family level, happier people have stronger relationships. So they have stronger relationships with their kids. They're able to be more supportive when times are challenging. They're also healthier. And, there are so many benefits that accrue from looking at the things in your life that are great instead of looking at the things in your life that are not great. It's a long list.
Yeah. I was having this conversation with a friend recently that I often feel embarrassed to say how happy I am. Generally, I have my bad days, yes, my dark days, but it is almost something where I'm like, it's an embarrassment. And maybe that is an American thing. I didn't think of it that way.
One of the experts that I spoke to said, sometimes when I interview Americans, I feel like they're afraid to be happy. And I just thought, oh man, I don't want to be that person. I don't know. It's our national focus is sort of on the worky things and the challenging things. We don't think about the good stuff. And that's crazy because we have so much. Mm-hmm. We have lovely modern lives of such abundance. And that doesn't have to mean that you're, a rich person toting around in a helicopter. We're better off than historically people have ever been, especially if you live in the Western world. And there's no reason not to treasure and savor that. There's no gain in not.
It's so interesting that, I don't want to get all philosophical, but it is interesting.
It is philosophical.
Why we're drawn to that, and so many parents with atypical kids, and we talk about this a lot on the podcast, is that we often lead with their deficits when we're introducing them to people, when we're discussing them, or just talking about our lives as families. We do tend to hone in on the hard stuff. And that, of course, shapes our experience. It shapes how our kids feel about themselves. It shapes how others perceive us. And it's just a good reminder that what we focus on is what we experience.
Yeah. And it's really, it's hard not to, honestly. It's especially when you have kids that are different, and I do. And you don't want to be judged for what's going on. You want your child to be welcomed for what they're bringing to the party. So, you want to lay out You sort of want to set things out. And that is completely understandable. But, to also just have in your own mind an ability not to be always dwelling on those things, but to, I think sometimes it can be really annoying to have people say, well, appreciate the positive things, be grateful. That's not what I'm saying. It's more just that our brains are really designed to focus on the negative stuff. So we don't need to give in to that. Like, our brains want to look for the tigers, right? That's our natural makeup. It's what has felt important throughout our lives. And for us to shift our mental mixtape to more of a positive one is difficult, but once you get it rolling, it becomes an earworm. It repeats. So yeah, we're all sort of playing those negative tunes all the time, and shifting out of that is huge. I mean, there's in my book and when I talk and everything, there's all kinds of practical sort of things that you can do to make it easier to be happier. But honestly, deciding to be happier is the biggest thing you can do.
Mm-hmm. That makes total sense. I mean,
doesn't make much of a book though. Just decide you want to be happier. It's funny how hard it's ridiculously simple to say and ridiculously hard to actually do.
Well, that's a conversation I have a lot, because a lot of what I'm trying to help parents do similarly is change the way that you're perceiving your situation and notice, so that you can start shifting the way that you're thinking, because the way that we're thinking controls our feelings, and it just kind of goes from there. But when people always want to know, but how exactly do you do that? Like, well, you start noticing, there's only so many ways you can break it down. It really just takes that intentional, conscious effort, I think, to decide I'm choosing to focus on being happier, to work on this, and to notice when I'm maybe being more negative.
Well, and what I talk about, our brains, if there's nothing immediately negative to do, then they often go to sort of the negative future. Well, what's my child going to be able to do? Oh my gosh, if she can't complete this addition sheet without getting up and twirling around 6 times, how is she ever going to have a job later in life? How is she ever going to have a partner? It's just, we want to jump to the many, many, many terrible, terrible things that could happen, which are not happening now and may well never happen. And we spend a lot of time torturing ourselves with those things.
Absolutely. So in terms of then what's getting in our way, so we've talked a little bit about this, and, even just the science that we do tend to dwell on negative things, or that we're wired to be concerned about potential dangers. What are some of the other barriers that you found in writing this book and researching it that get in our way when we're pursuing more happiness in our families?
Well, truly, there are objective things that, make our lives as families, our modern lives, lovely as they are, challenging. There's mornings when everybody has to be somewhere earlier than anybody wants to be anywhere. There's the sort of stressful end of the day so there's a lot of expectations to be met. Or if you're thinking about sports and activities, there really is they really are more intense. I mean, it's an objective fact. You can look at the ways that something like soccer has changed over the past 2 or 3 decades and see there's more practices, there's more possibilities, there's more individual coaching. There's all kinds of sort of things knocking on our doors and asking for our attention and our time, not digitally and in the real world. So those are hard. So taking a look at whatever area of your life is stressing you out, and recognizing that some of that is stuff you can control and some of it is coming at you from the outside. I think a lot of the time we blame ourselves for everything. We say, oh my God, I'm the only person who can't find a good daycare. You're so not the only person nobody can find a good daycare. It's catastrophic how difficult it is to find a good daycare. And, you might be entitled to a subsidy, and everybody else is getting it. There's no places. And I mean, there are things that are making this hard. So okay, those are the cards that I've been dealt, the things that are making this hard. Now I have to work within that framework. So sort of giving yourself a little slack because things are challenging, that's an important step. And then going ahead and taking on, all right, well, what can I change? I can't find a good daycare, but I could, talk to my boss about that 4:15 meeting. That means I'm never out of the office until 5:05. That means I'm always late and I'm always paying the $5 minute penalty and I'm always stressed while I'm driving across town. That's a constant. Is there something I can change about that? So looking for the things that you can change.
Do you have thoughts or suggestions for listeners who are wanting to change something but feel as if they have limited options? In your chapter about the morning routine, you tell a great story about how you thought you found the right solution by bringing somebody in, and that turned out to be the wrong solution. But there's a lot of parents, I think, who feel that they don't have a lot of choice. And I'm always trying to encourage parents to get creative and think outside the box about what might be possible, that you may have more choice in this than you think. But any advice on how parents who feel like, I don't have a lot of wiggle room here, these are the cards I've been dealt, and I don't even know where to start in terms of changing my experience in this?
Well, I have two thoughts. And the first is that if you want to think about trying to change the experience, something to think about is, what is your real goal there? So one of the things for me in the morning is that I went from thinking that my goal was to get everyone out of the house and where they needed to go on time to deciding that no, my goal is actually to have a pleasant morning and give everyone a decent start to their day. That changed everything. So that was big. So if you look at, what's the bigger thing that I want, that's one of the things that you can do. And what was the other one? Oh, just also you can shift the goal, or you can shift how you think about it. So for example, my kids all play travel hockey. They just do. And that means that we spend a lot of time in the winter on the weekends driving them places, because we live in rural New Hampshire and it's not like all the teams are right here and you can go play the game in the morning. And so a lot of the time we're on the road. And what I needed to do was go, okay, look, really, I do have some choice here, because, we do a lot of carpooling, but a lot of the parents just go to the games. So it doesn't feel like you can sort of really choose not to go to the games, but really I could. I could pay a teenager, or I could just always ask the other parents to take my kids. Certain parents are always going to go. Would they feel like I was mooching? Maybe, but they're going to go anyway. I do have a choice here, and I'm not making it. And the reason that I'm not making it is that, honestly, I want to be there at least some of the time. My kids do this sport and they love it, and I want to be a part of it. And I don't want to miss their whole weekends or not be there if something goes wrong, as has happened a couple of times. So let's shift my thinking from, oh my God, I have to spend my weekend driving to Concord, to, I really want to take my kid to Concord to play in this game. Given the situation, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do. We sort of pretend in our minds that we'd rather be on a beach having a fizzy, cute beverage with an umbrella or something. But really, you probably wouldn't. Not if your kids are going to be there driving to hockey. So changing the way you think about this thing that you have to do, that can go a long way.
We'll be right back after this quick break. During this month of planning and organization for big transitions, rhythms and routines have been absolutely essential for our physical and emotional well-being. So Green Chef nights are reliably and predictably a good night. We know the ingredients will be fresh and prepped, the instructions easy to follow, and the meal delicious. We're all still talking about last week's turkey tacos with mango chimichurri sauce, refried beans, and Monterey Jack cheese. Green Chef contributes to a healthy lifestyle with easy and delicious menus like fresh seasonal salads and grain bowls. And with over 80 weekly meal and market options, plus rotating options to suit a variety of lifestyles, whether Mediterranean, plant-based, calorie-smart, keto, protein-packed, gluten-free, there are always plenty of options to choose from. Whatever you select, you'll get farm-fresh ingredients, organic whole fruits and veggies, and premium proteins, all delivered straight to your door. I love those 4 words, straight to my door. Oh, and one more thing I love about Green Chef, they have an app, which means it's easy to manage meal preferences and delivery from your phone if you want to. And I, for one, want to. I am in that mode where I'm making the most of little moments like waiting in line at the pharmacy or for the F train to pull into the station to tackle all of those to-dos. So the convenience of an app is key for me. Green Chef has a special offer for Tilt listeners. Go to greenchef.com/tilt50 and use code TILT50 to get 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months. That's 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months when you use the code TILT50 at greenchef.com/tilt50. Maybe I've watched too many seasons of The Amazing Race, but every time I have to go somewhere on the subway, I treat it like a competition. It's all about making the right gut decisions about which route will get me there the fastest. Sometimes those decisions get me where I'm going early, and other times my gambles don't really pay off. Probiotics can't help with most gut decisions, but if your gut needs a little support, Ritual has your back. Their Synbiotic Plus, a 3-in-1 supplement, has clinically studied prebiotics, probiotics, and a postbiotic to support a balanced gut microbiome. I've been using Synbiotic Plus for about 6 months now, and it's become a core part of my morning routine. I take the mini capsule every morning while making my way through my inbox, whether I'm at home or I'm on the road, because it doesn't need to be refrigerated. And the capsule itself is delayed released, which helps it survive the harsh conditions of the upper GI tract for delivery to the colon, and that's exactly where we want it to go. Ritual invested in a study modeling the human colon, which showed that Synbiotic Plus significantly increased microbial diversity and the growth of beneficial bacteria. There's no more shame in your gut game. Synbiotic Plus and Ritual are here to celebrate, not hide your insides. Get 25% off your first month for a limited time at ritual.com/tilt. Start Ritual or add Synbiotic Plus to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/tilt for 25% off. I absolutely agree. I do that with my birthdays now. Instead of lamenting, how old I'm getting, I say, wow, I get to turn this age this year, and even just that little language.
So much better than the alternative.
It's so much. Yeah. Exactly.
I like language is important. Yeah. I don't use the word busy because I don't like it. It feels negative. Realistically, if I really step back and look at my time, if I want to do something, I'm going to find the time for it. If I don't want to do it, I'm not. I'm not too busy to do your thing. I just don't want to. Mm-hmm. Yeah, occasionally, you've asked me to have coffee and I have a meeting. I mean, but that's then we're going to find a different time. I try not to use negative language around the things that are really either choices or things that, and sometimes there's no choice. You're going to do it. Maybe it's not what you want to do. But complaining isn't going to help. Just to channel your mother here and mine, you're going to do this anyway. It's up to you how you feel about it while you do it.
Absolutely. So you have a chapter in your book about screen time. That is something that I think all parents are just trying to sort out. And
yeah, it's a tough one right now.
It's a tough one. And it's particularly challenging, I think, because parents with kids who have ADHD or some other neurodifferences going on, we're also getting some serious conflicting messages about, is this exacerbating issues? But a lot of our kids on the spectrum are really drawn to screens and technology. Yep. I'm just wondering, could you give us some bigger takeaways from that chapter about what you found can be helpful in creating more happiness, if you will, around the area of screen time?
Yeah, this is so hard. And the reason that it's so hard is that we have absolutely no example for how to deal with it. And yeah, you're getting conflicting messages. And the reason that everybody's getting conflicted messages, the reason for that is that no one knows. And we're really not going to know. There's not a way to do studies on this. Plus, it's a constantly changing thing. It's not like you can say, well, 7 years of consistently playing Minecraft is going to, because your kid's not going to play Minecraft for 7 years. They're going to switch on to the next thing. They're going to switch to the next thing. The phone is going to be super appealing. And then all of a sudden you're going to upgrade your operating system. And all of a sudden the phone says, I'm going to tell you how much time you're spending on me. It's a constantly changing target. So we just have to wrap our head around the idea that there is actually not a right answer. There is only what is going to work for you and your family right now. And that might change tomorrow. And that's annoying. But that is the technological world that we live in. So given that, usually when I talk to parents about this, I sort of divide it into two groups. And if your kids are young enough that you own the things to which they access the internet or television, If it's your TV or it's your phone or it's your iPad, even if they think it's their iPad, then you should be in control. There shouldn't be any question in anyone's mind who decides when the screen time is and what the rules are around it. And if there is, then it's time to take that back and maybe make a rule that any whining, if you want it turned off, means it's gone for the next day. Or and make whatever rules that you want to make livable for you. So my rule when my kids were younger and for a very, very, very long time was weekends, yes, go for it. Have as much screen time as you want until I tell you that your head's going to explode and then you have to stop. Weekdays, no. And the reason for that was almost entirely because when I set the rule, we weren't really having a problem. My kids were younger and it was almost entirely that they were making me crazy by asking all the time. And so that solved that problem. You don't even ask. If it's Thursday, no. You just no. And that was so beautiful. And it went for a long time. But then we got to the point where 3 of the 4 have phones and the 4th one has a laptop. And, they can, for me to monitor that. And also, it wasn't even just that. It's like, well, what is screen time when you're in high school and all your homework is on the computer? Is texting screen time? Is Snapchat screen time? And, I'm not going to tell you can't. You're 16 years old. I'm not going to tell you can't Snapchat your friends Monday through Friday. So we let that go. And when you get to the point of wanting to let whatever rule that you have go, now it's time to look at the big goal for your teenagers. And the goal for all of us with screen time is pretty much the same, and it's not what we think. You don't want to raise a kid who can follow your screen time rules. You want to raise a kid who understands the need to moderate their own screen time. And that is so hard. And I can't say, here is how you do it. I am sorry. I wish that I could. I can tell you that our experience has been a shift to that and then a panic around the amount of screen time that one kid began to just, oh my goodness. I was like, this is a terrible idea. And we were just having these constant conversations. All right, how many hours is that? Would you want to tell your teacher about that? Would you want to, is that really what you wanted to do with your day? Or in the morning, all right, how many hours are you planning on spending? Well, if you don't know, you know how that's going to work out. Oh, and over and over and over again. And finally, after 6 months, we're starting to see some shift. And what I was going to do if I'm not telling you that there was shift, I was probably going to say, all right, this child is not ready for this move to moderation, and we're gonna, it's going to have to be the phone gets checked in at night or what. We would have gone on to something else, but we are starting to see some movement and some boredom with it. Because the important thing to remember is that we're all, as adults, dealing with this. The conversation around how hard it is for us to put down our phones and how hard it is for us to moderate our social media time and how, if you want to be a writer, you got to turn off your Netflix and just, it's all, this is like a larger national conversation, and our teenagers are having it too. They're having it at school. They're having it with each other. They're coming up with ideas to put their phones away when they get together. This is going to be their problem. So we can't feel like we're going to solve it for them.
Yeah, it's so interesting, I think. And it depends on where, how old your child is and where you are with things. Me with a 14-year-old in the house who, we always are modifying the screen time rules, but I'm at that place where you are, where I'm really just like, listen, this is something you're going to have to figure out, and just trying to help him notice, oh, how are you feeling after being on the computer that many hours? How's that hand of yours? But, and I will say, I think a lot of parents across the board, I always have to qualify, I think this applies to everybody, but especially my audience, we can get really fused also with our kids' experience, with their emotions. Emotionally, we're very tied to them. And, I have just found as I've stepped back more that I'm able to not get so wrapped up in his moods or, his emotions. And that has helped me feel happier. And it makes me, I want to speak to something that you also talk about, which is that we should be happy even when our kids aren't. That's something I've been thinking a lot about. We were talking earlier, we're in the middle of this relocation back to the US. We're kind of right in the middle of it as we're having this conversation. And there's a lot of emotions happening in my house right now. And we're both kind of taking turns who's happy and sad on what day. But I find it, I'm balancing this, like, is it okay for me to feel really happy or to be in a great mood when he's having a really bad day? Can you talk about that? How can we separate ourselves and how does that benefit our kids if we can actually be in a happy place, even if our kids are having a really tough time?
Yeah. The thing is that it's not just okay, it's important. It's really good for them to see that their parent can be okay even when they are having a tough time. And that does not mean that, we are dancing around going, ha, 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 I don't have a Spanish test and you do. It's not like some sort of weird gloating thing. It's just that, we are our own emotional people and they are their own, and we are together and we are sympathetic and empathetic to each other and aware of one another's moods, but we don't have to absorb one another's moods because our kids actually don't want to make us unhappy, unlikely as that may seem at certain moments. They don't like it. So one of the things that happens if we're too responsive, if we get, if when they're upset, we're upset, is they start to come home with a problem and they tell you about their problem. They say, well, I wasn't invited to the birthday party. I didn't make the team. And you get really upset. And a couple things happen for them. And one is, oh, wow, I didn't think this was that big a deal, but apparently it actually is. And the other is, oh, when I tell my dad about this sort of thing, he gets really upset. So maybe I just shouldn't tell him because that would be easier. I'll just keep it in. I'll just pretend to be happy, even when I'm not, so that he can also be happy. This is so not the goal. So we don't want to put the burden of our happiness on our kids. We don't want them to feel like they are in charge of that is their problem. Because, we can relate to this as adults. If you are an adult and, maybe you've just lost your job, the last thing you need is for your mother to implode over it, right? But some of our mothers do that. So then there you are, and you've lost your job, and you're sort of putting it, and you have to deal with, like, every day your mother's calling you hysterical because she's worried about how you're going to get on with your life. And what you really need is for your mom to be like, oh, that's really hard. Call me anytime you need to talk about it, but I've got a tennis game. So, I am going to get off the phone in 15 minutes. That's what you want. And when we respond to our kids' challenges with that kind of empathy, with that, oh my gosh, that is really hard. What are you thinking? Is there anything that I can do for you? What are you going to do next? Or often more likely, just tell me about it. Do you want to tell me any more? Wow, that sounds like it really hurts. Then what they're seeing is, this probably isn't that bad because my parents not losing their mind. My parents are okay, and therefore I will be okay. Like, this is going to pass. And that's the thing with most of their stuff. We know we're grown-ups, and this is a consistent pattern among parents who call themselves happier. They know that most of the stuff that panics our kids, that's not a tiger. It's not really a bad thing. It's not really a threat. It's not really terrible not to get into the same second grade class as all of your friends and have the hard teacher on top of that. It's not really terrible not to make the fifth grade soccer team or to fail a Spanish test or to lose your girlfriend or even not to get into your top choice college. Because we know we've all had some of those experiences and we know it works out.
Right. So it's holding that space. It's
empathizing. And giving that gift, giving that to our kids.
Right.
And also, some of the time too, sometimes they're just dumping. And we go in there and we get all in on their emotion and we're all worried about what we're going to do to help them out with this thing. And then it blows right over. And I'm sure you've had that experience. So many times I've had that experience. And finally, this past weekend, I was at a thing of my own, and I was in a room with a lot of other people, and we were doing something fun, and I get my phone rings, and it's my daughter, and I will always answer for my daughter, and it wasn't rude. And so I answer, and my daughter has had to go to a hockey game away with another family, which that's not at all unusual. But anyway, something has happened. I can't tell what because she's crying far too hard for me to tell what happened. But eventually I'm able to figure out that she's not physically hurt. She's upset. and part of her upset. And I can't, I'm in a loud place, so I can't really hear her. Plus she's sobbing. So I couldn't even, if I wanted to tell you this probably private thing that happened to her, I couldn't because I have no idea. I gathered eventually that it had something to do with one of the people she was going to have to drive home with. But all I could do was sit there and go, oh man, that's terrible. That sounds really hard. Yeah. Wow. Because I can't even understand her. So I just sat there for about 10 minutes repeating that and listening. And eventually we get to, okay, bye. And she hung up and the phone didn't ring again. And a few hours later, she came home and I came in later than she did and I found her and she's like, yeah, it's okay now. And I was like, okay, I don't even know. I don't even need to know. So, I could have spent sort of the afternoon panicking, could have called the parent, that she had ridden with. The fact that my daughter is a teenager has something to do with the reason I wouldn't. It just didn't. If it had needed that kind of response, she would have kept calling. Like it would have escalated. Mm-hmm. Something else would have kept happening. So I just, not only did I not, I really completely forgot about it until she came home.
We'll be right back after this quick break. Hey there, it's Debbie. I love making this show and sharing conversations about how to support our awesome neurodivergent kids. I've seen how even one little insight from an interview can spark a big shift in daily life. But I know that raising complex kids can be messy and lonely. And just when we think we figured it out, something comes up that boots us right back to feeling overwhelmed and stuck. That's why I've poured everything into creating a way for parents like us navigating complex parenting journeys to join together and chart a path that feels positive, hopeful, and doable. It's the brand new Differently Wired Club experience. In the club, you'll get personal support from me and other seasoned parent coaches, 6 live calls every month where you can connect and get your personal questions answered, the opportunity to learn directly from authors and experts like I have on this show, monthly themes for getting specific and tactical, an exclusive private podcast feed, and the best, most generous community of parents. Seriously, these folks show up for themselves and each other, and that right there is really everything. Because it's a daily reminder that we're not alone. Our kids aren't broken, and we have totally got this. The recently rebooted Differently Wired Club is on a brand new platform with its very own iOS and Android app. It is such a great space. However you learn, whatever your style, no matter the ages, genders, and neurodivergent profile of your children, the Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Join us today by going to tiltparenting.com/club. That's tiltparenting.com/club. I hope to see you on the inside.
If you're a parent, I invite you to join us at the Mindful Mama podcast, where it's all about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. With sometimes hilarious and always thought-provoking experts and friends, at Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm Hunter Clark Fields, and I can't wait to see you there. Listen in to the Mindful Mama podcast.
So I just have to ask, is that something you had to teach yourself how to do?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, years ago, and even with my older child, so it hasn't have to do with the child's age, I would have called that other parent. I would have tried to figure out, I couldn't hear her. I would have gotten up and very inconveniently to everyone else involved, managed to leave that room and gotten to somewhere where I could hear her. I would have gotten to the bottom of this and seen what I could do, and maybe even gotten in the car, because you don't want to have to ride home with people that are bullying you, right? Pretty sure she pulled the bullying word. She's not being bullied. But yeah, no, I definitely did. I've had to have the experience multiple times of trying to take action, and then having it turn out, as it often does, that the kid didn't really want you to do anything, or that you've embarrassed them by doing it. And then you sort of start to turn in and ask yourself, well, when I'm telling somebody stuff like this, do I want them to fix it? I mean, that's like a classic thing, right? When you tell your partner all about something and they're like trying to give you answers for what you can do about it. And you're like, I don't want answers. Just listen to me.
Right.
So your kid doesn't necessarily want answers, and they don't necessarily want your full buy-in. I think it's very comforting to them when we don't lose our minds over this stuff.
Yeah, agreed. So I'm wondering if you could leave us with just a couple specific strategies for how listeners, me, anyone who's listening to this podcast.
I use these strategies. It's not like I was born with all this. I learned it researching this book, and it's been great.
So what are just a couple of strategies for parents listening who are saying, okay, this sounds good. I definitely want more happiness in my day-to-day life. What are some little things I can start even paying attention to make that happen?
Well, one great little thing that you can do is just to start training your brain to go down that happier path. So it's putting a stop when you're spinning what I call like the sadness spinner. Think of your brain as having a fidget spinner on the side of it, and the fidget spinner kind of goes like this. Oh my God, you didn't get into fourth grade math, extended math. And if you don't do fourth grade advanced math, then you don't get to do pre-algebra. The spinner is spinning really fast now, right? And if you don't do pre-algebra, then you're not in time to do geometry when you're in 8th grade. And if you don't do geometry in 8th grade, you don't get to calculus. And if you don't get to and then you don't get to Harvard, and you don't become, a consultant at a big consulting firm where everyone is super unhappy and Xeroxing things and working 60 hours a week. That's what you don't get. Poor child. And you might get that anyway, because come on. So we're constantly spinning that. So stopping that spinner, that's big. And one of the ways to stop that spinner, and this comes from a lovely neuropsychologist that I talked to, is to take that deep breath and look up at the horizon, because apparently something about looking at the horizon resets your brain to see the bigger picture, which is kind of beautiful because you're looking at the beautiful picture, but it's apparently a real actual thing. And then take a minute to soak in that really for you at that moment, even though your child is perhaps not in advanced 4th grade math, everything is fine. Everything is actually good. This is what you wanted. You have your happy life. So take a moment to soak in what's good about where you are at that minute. And I'll bet that there's a lot of it. People really argue with that because we are afraid to soak in the good because it seems like we're inviting the bad. If I stop worrying that the plane will crash, the plane will crash. We have this crazy magical thinking idea that we're preventing all this stuff from spending all our time worrying and strategizing over it. And we're not. So to just let yourself have the good stuff that's out there, that's really huge. It's really big.
Yeah, I talk about looking for the bright spots because that alone can change everything. There are bright spots even when you have to work really hard to find them,
There are.
Yeah.
Well, and then there's the practical side of this. Okay, first of all, one thing everybody should notice is you're probably fine in some area. There's 9 chapters in my book. There's mornings and there's chores and there's meals and there's screens and there's this. So you're probably fine in at least 1 or 2 of those. So, pat yourself on the back for that. If it's screens, please don't tell the rest of us because that would just be annoying. But you're probably doing fine about something. And then pick an area where you're not and pick some little thing and try to figure out some practical, simple strategy. So I talked to someone recently. I thought this was so awesome. She found that every day when she picked her kid up from aftercare, the kid was having a tantrum in the car. And, it's a transition thing. Oh my gosh, the transition tantrums that I have lived through, I get it. So instead of sort of going down this, oh my God, my kid's still having tantrums. He's too old for tantrums. And, this is, she was just like, what can I do to fix that tantrum at that moment? Because I just can't deal with it, on Friday at 5:00 as we're heading home or whatever. So she took the kid aside at a moment when they weren't having the tantrum, a quiet moment. And she said, I've been thinking about how you always have a tantrum when I pick you up. And that timing isn't working for me. It's very inconvenient. So I was thinking that what if we change the schedule a little bit? What if we got home and we'll make dinner and then you can have your tantrum and then we'll have dinner and then it'll be bedtime. And, the kid cracked up. And now they have this new way of talking about it. So he gets in the car and she starts to, and she's like, no, it's not time yet. this is on the schedule for later. And some of our kids really love schedules, right? And it was this huge success. And I just loved it because, and it actually ended up helping with their tantrums overall, but that was just a bonus. So it's not like sometimes you can't solve like a huge thing, but maybe you can just try to poke at some little tiny piece of it and make that better.
I love that. Creative and bringing in unexpected humor.
Yes.
Always works, at least in my house, because it throws them off. And then sometimes they can just see the inanity of the situation. That's awesome. So, okay. So the book is, for listeners, it's How to Be a Happier Parent, Raising a Family, Having a Life, and Loving Almost Every Minute. So can you just let listeners know where they can find the book and where they can connect with you?
You can connect with me at kjdell'antonia.com or howtobeahappier.parent.com, both of which will take you to exactly the same place. The book is available pretty much anywhere. If you go to my website, there's this fun quiz you can do about like which parenting mantra you need at any moment. Because one of my things in the book is that sometimes it just really helps to have something to say to yourself. Like soak in the good, or you don't have to go in there, which is one of the ways that I talk about not getting emotionally involved, getting crazy with your kids' emotions. And we made this little quiz where you can find the one that you need at this exact moment.
That's awesome. Okay, so listeners, I will leave links to everything that we discussed, to KJ's book, her website, and where you can learn the best mantras for your situation on the show notes pages. So definitely check that out. And KJ, thank you so much for this fascinating conversation. I'm got some new inspiration for approaching my evening here, as we're going to be getting back into homework and other things that need to happen tonight. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This was really fun.
You've been listening to the Tilt Parenting Podcast. For the show notes for this episode, including links to KJ's website, her book, How to Be a Happier Parent, and more, visit tiltparenting.com/session 136. If you haven't had a chance to check out my new book, Differently Wired, and you want to see if it's for you, don't forget you can download the first chapter and the table of contents at tiltparenting.com/book. And if you have read it already and like what you read, please consider leaving a review on Amazon or Goodreads or both. Those reviews help boost the book's visibility. And of course, I couldn't end a podcast without my weekly reminder. If you haven't done so already, please consider going over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating or a review. Thank you so much. And thanks again for listening. For more information on Tilt Parenting, visit www.tiltparenting.com.
Hey, are you a parent of a teenager? Are you feeling overwhelmed about how to be what they need while also holding limits and boundaries that keep them safe? Are you tired of conversations that negate how messy this season of parenting is? Well, I've got you. My name is Casey O'Rourke. I am a positive discipline trainer, parent coach, and the host of the Joyful Courage podcast. Every week, I come to you with an interview digging into tough topics with experts I trust and solo shows that go deep into the personal growth and mindset needed to raise teens in a way that grows them into confident, capable young people. I am not afraid of getting real about the intersection of conscious parenting and the teen years, while also bringing in vulnerability, humor, and lightness. I'm walking the path with you and honored to serve. Listen to Joyful Courage on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you consume podcasts.